Hey everybody, welcome into Before the Hedges presented by Kroger. I'm Hannah Chalker alongside our Georgia recruiting expert, Jeff Sintel. Thanks for joining us today. We've got a great show for you. We're going to talk about the SEC Championship, the rematch with Auburn. We're going to talk about the SEC coaching turmoil that's going on and how that affects Georgia recruiting. And we're also going to give you an update on four-star defensive end Brenton Cox. And you had a pretty cool blog post about him as well. So we're going to get to that. But first, let's talk about the rivalry. Georgia Tech, big win in Bobby Dodd. I think that Georgia's undefeated in Bobby Dodd for the past century.
Yeah.
Great win, great check for the season for Kirby Smart, great check for the seniors. What are your thoughts on the game?
I think the main thing you got to think about there is a big perspective win for Georgia. Got to remember, a guy like Nick Chubb had only beaten Georgia Tech one time on the field during his career, and that was, last year's game, 28-27. Tech came in, they tore up Georgia's Hedges. Pretty curious before this game, I saw Tech had kind of roped off their midfield GT logo so nobody could stomp on it, kind of like a squared circle, sort of like a wrestling ring. And Georgia, listen to this, they were kind of, their mantra before the game was they're like, let's send them home for Christmas, because they know if Georgia were to put the beat down on Tech like they did, Tech would not become bowl eligible and they would be hanging out at Christmas time and not playing football. And that's just what the Bulldogs did.
There was another small rivalry over on the Plains. It's called the Iron Bowl. I'm not sure if you were watching it or not, but of course Auburn got the upset over Alabama there. They will rematch. Before we get your thoughts on the rematch, were you shocked that Auburn defeated Alabama?
I was not. I thought Auburn was the better team. I thought they had everything up front. You looked at the way that Auburn kind of manhandled Georgia at Jordan-Hare. You had to think about the home field advantage in that rivalry so big. And Auburn, remember that stat out there that was great, how Nick Saban's kryptonite with Auburn? Nick Saban has never beaten an Auburn team that won at least 9 games, and that streak is still intact. And then also, you got to look at that student section, that bonkers atmosphere, swag surf. I mean, anybody out there that knows what swag surf's all about? That was a great time on the Plains for Auburn.
Yeah, our Alabama recruiting reporter, Chris Kirshner, even came back with like a battle wound. He had like this big cut under his eye. So crazy thing happened at Jordan-Hare. Well, let's talk about just that. And I know that fans were kind of torn. Like, do we want Auburn? Do we want Alabama? Georgia has had the SEC Championship berth clinched since November 4th. So they've just been waiting on who are we going to play. Well, it's Auburn. Fans, we want to know your thoughts on what you think about Auburn rematch. Jeff?
How much are we going to talk about this game and talk about this game and think about this game over this? Everybody's going to talk about wobble, Charlie Brown voice. You can't beat a team twice. How are you going to beat two teams in the same team twice in 4 weeks? How will Georgia play in a neutral site? Most of the people in the bins, Georgia's fans, have gotten all the tickets in the world. They've gobbled them up. Will Georgia's quarterbacks play better? Yada, yada, yada. Simple here. The team that establishes the line of scrimmage and makes more plays in special teams is going to win this football game, even though the SEC West has dominated the SEC championship game. You got to go all the way back to 2008, the glory years of Urban Meyer and Tim Tebow at Florida, to find the last time the SEC East beat the SEC West in the SEC title game. And I'm going to tell you what, this is going to be a tease. I'll throw a prediction out there, but that will come a little bit later in the show.
All right, I was about to say, now it's an early prediction.
Early prediction.
We got to keep them waiting for that.
We're going to stretch it out. We're going to stretch it out.
We'll stretch it out. All right, fans, we want your comments and your questions. Keep those rolling in as the show goes on, and we'll get those a little bit later on. But I still want to talk about the SEC Championship, obviously. This is our SEC Championship episode because it's this Saturday. So we'll see who's the winner and who gets a berth in the college football playoff. That determines this game as well, which means that Auburn and Georgia are going to be vying for recruits more than ever on Saturday. There's going to be some big-time guys there, I believe. What is the comparison now with the classes since they're clashing?
Well, you always look at the matchup like this and you start thinking about, okay, who does Auburn have that Georgia wished that they could have gotten? And you have to kind of stretch into the Alabama years a little bit with Kirby Smart. But you see a big-time guy like Derek Brown, for instance, the state's top player a couple of years ago, playing really well for Auburn. You see Darius Slayton, who's a guy that came out of Greater Atlanta Christian, a speedster. He's the go-to receiver now. for Auburn, along with Ryan Davis. Those are two guys that got away. You got to remember Darius Slayton was also committed to Georgia at one time. Another big defensive end by the name of Marlon Davidson is a guy Georgia, old staff, new staff, every staff in the country really wanted to see there as well. So there's a lot of pieces there, including some pieces that Kirby wish he could have added when he was at Alabama, like a Kerryon Johnson. I think I counted it up. There's 27 Georgia boys on the roster at Auburn. Lots of good players. To me, I think it comes down to how well these two schools have recruited over the past 3 or 4 years, because those guys kind of stockpile the depth charts, the two deeps. And if you look at Georgia over the last 5 years, their recruiting class, on the average, is number 5 overall. And then you look at Auburn's, and their recruiting class, comparatively, is 8th overall. So that's a really fine line, a really big margin for error, where both of these schools are going to have players. Both of these schools are going to have schemes. They're going to be well coached. It's going to be a very interesting time for Georgia and Auburn. But the main thing here is, like, there's not really, everybody's going to make this comment, who's on the line, like which recruits are really going to swing. I just don't think that's the case.
Well, a funny note that I have here is that 5 of Auburn's starters in the Iron Bowl are Georgia guys, guys that Kirby Smart and company wanted. So what does that tell you? There's already kind of some recruiting battles going on between Auburn and Georgia, and now it's just heightened, right? Yeah,
these are the state of Georgia produces so many great players. There is no question about that. And I think a lot of times for Georgia, there's a case where, I think Kirby even said it over the weekend, as he says, both schools offer a player, and these players are both very good, but maybe it comes down to is which staff just prioritizes, which shows the recruit they value them more and they want them more. And again, the other thing to think about Smart and the Bulldogs is you're never going to get everybody. You're never going to get all the players in the state of Georgia. Georgia's just got to make hay by getting around 10 or 12 of the top 20 every year, and they'll be able to protect the borders. They'll be able to represent the state very well. And again, that is going to be a huge test for Auburn, because Auburn is big and physical up front. They've got a big-time transfer quarterback in Jared Stidham. Kerryon Johnson, that is the huge factor. Not only will he play, but how effectively will he play? Will he hit the hole at 80%, 90%? Will he only be limited about 10 or 12 carries? The most important thing for Auburn is they need to make sure, whether they bubble wrap Kerryon Johnson or whatever, they need to make sure that Kerryon Johnson is good enough to take 10 big carries in the fourth quarter if it's close. And I think that's what nobody knows right now.
You mentioned some current recruiting battles between Auburn and Georgia, and some ones that the Tigers have actually won over the Dogs. What are some of the names that we can look for future battling it out between Auburn and Georgia?
I think everybody asks, like, okay, will one of these players choose Georgia or Auburn because of this game? And it really doesn't work that way. A lot of these recruits, they tell me that that's this team. I'm concerning myself with the players that I will play with in 2018, 2019, 2020, and those are the guys maybe they pay more attention to. But for grins and giggles, there's 2 guys that are kind of on the board for both teams, which I kind of see as ultimately a Georgia or Auburn decision. First of those is Big Trey Hill out of Houston County. 4-star OG. I always love calling offensive lineman that. 4-star OG. Nation's number 2 offensive guard. Just took an official visit to Auburn. Was maybe his second time in 3 weeks to Auburn. He was also there for the Georgia game. Now keep in mind, Trey Hill will also take his official visit to Georgia on December the 8th. So he's going to go back to Georgia again after this game. And I think he's a guy that's going to ultimately side between Georgia or Auburn. Maybe the truest kind of battleground recruit there is. And I think there's another guy, a 2019 guy, big-time tight end, Rylan Godey. Rylan's about 6'7". He can crush a golf ball. He shoots about 77 on the golf course. He can hit a baseball about 450 feet, and he's also one of the nation's top tight ends for 2019. 6'7.5", about 235, great physical player, can do just about everything. And he really likes Auburn a lot, even though Auburn really doesn't incorporate the tight end of their offense really well. And he's a guy to think about as maybe a guy that will ultimately side between Georgia and Auburn. But the closest short-term attention span recruit right now, that would have to be Trey Hill.
Let's talk about another TE. We'll go with TE for tight end since you're going to go OG. Luke Ford, the four-star tight end out of Illinois, he was actually on an official visit at Jordan-Hare Stadium on the sidelines for that big win, big atmosphere. He's a guy that Georgia really wants. So was he impressed with the Tigers?
He was. Got to give credit. The Tigers had a great official visit. I think they put him up in the same hotel that Charles Barkley was staying at.
Oh, nice.
Which you're living swag there.
Oh, yeah.
And you've got the interesting thing there with Luke Ford is his brother Noah. His brother Noah is a couple of years older. He is a walk-on candidate at a lot of schools, Auburn, Texas, Georgia. He would be a fullback at Georgia or Auburn. So he hosted both brothers on the official visit, Luke and Noah. And Luke had a great trip. If you read the reports coming out of Luke's official visit to Auburn, he's now got a top 3. Auburn had kind of moseyed its way into the top 3 there with Alabama and Georgia. I just kind of think Luke Ford's decision, Alabama's sort of there. Georgia, I think, is in the catbird seat. And Auburn made up a lot of ground. But you got to remember, Georgia's also going to have an official visit down the road as well to kind of protect their interest a little bit with Luke Ford. And Luke Ford's a guy that a lot of Dawg fans I know kind of have him in their mock classes. And right now, at this time, I don't think that would be wrong.
That's Just Some Tell. I'm Hannah Chalker. Thanks so much for joining us on Before the Hedges. Let's move right along to Brenton Cox. This is a 4-star, 5-star, wherever you get your recruiting information from, defensive end from Stockbridge, Georgia. And you wrote up an interesting article on him today. He's kind of leaning towards Georgia. He is an Ohio State commit.
Yeah, he's getting the feels for Georgia right now. That's the best way I'll say that. And, DawgNation, if you're listening right now, you've got your mock class. I hope you put that out there in pencil, definitely not Sharpie, because these again are going to be some rich program problems with Brenton Cox. This Georgia class, and Brenton Cox says he's thinking a lot about Georgia. Georgia is gaining on Ohio State. He thinks he can be developed now. They're like another Leonard Floyd. And to me, if you're looking at this class, you've got to look at this class like the first Thanksgiving plate you had from Grandma's house. And here's what you got to do. You got to move that stuffing around. You got to move that squash casserole around. You got to send the cranberries over to this side. You got some honey baked ham. You got some dressing. You got 2 kinds of dressing. You got to just scooch that all around the plate to put a 5-star defensive end in terms of Brenton Cox onto the board for Georgia. He's just so talented. You got to take Brenton Cox.
On the plate, what is Brenton Cox?
Brenton Cox.
The honey baked ham?
No, he would be the turkey, the fried turkey that had the Cajun spice all over it, that somebody went and got on Amazon and got all that stuff about it, and got a new fryer kit, got some new injectors and everything else. Brenton Cox, nation's number 2 strong side defensive end, 6'5", 250, number 19 prospect overall, another 5-star. It comes a point where Georgia could potentially land another 5-star, and all you fans out there are kind of wondering what in the world, what are we doing with this guy? These are just good problems to have.
All right, Brenton Cox, you're the turkey if you're watching, and Georgia wants you to flip from Ohio State. So not only are we hearing about guys flipping from Ohio State, the turmoil that was the SEC on Sunday and throughout the week just made me dizzy. I mean, Tennessee, Ole Miss, Mississippi State, Arkansas, Florida. Who am I missing?
You're missing about all of them. Texas A&M.
Texas A&M.
And I mean, I tell you what, it was not a good hair day for Tennessee football. Let's just start that out right now. They had so many things going on. They had remind Georgia fans a little bit of Glenn Mason back in 1995. There was a memorandum of understanding. Schiano was at UT. They paint the rock with some things that a lot of maybe young ball fans are going to have to explain to their children a little bit about. But Schiano's in, Schiano's out. You've got things going on at Texas A&M. Is Jimbo Fisher in? What's going on with Arkansas? What's going on with Ole Miss? They, I think, smartly decided to just go ahead and name Matt Luke because there were so many job openings. You have Dan Mullen. Reports were coming out that Scott Frost turned down the job, which meant an immediate pivot to Dan Mullen, and everything's great. He's hired. He's going to Gainesville. I think the biggest thing for Georgia fans to think about right there are 2. One, Georgia, I think, most often goes to head-to-head with a school like Tennessee, a school like Florida, and Florida State. Jimbo Fisher to Texas A&M would definitely destabilize Florida State. And you kind of wonder what kind of big name is going to come in there for Florida State and really crush it. And then Tennessee just continues to be unstable. It's getting so close to that early signing period where I think that program, the longer it waits, the more they just going to have to write off the 2018 recruiting class. So I think there's a lot of moving parts here. The big thing for there is Mullen to Florida. And I think Georgia fans are probably quietly thinking that Georgia and this staff can out-recruit Dan Mullen, especially in some key spots. And if you're an SEC East school or an SEC West school where you have no coaching turnover right now or no turmoil right now, you've got to be thinking, we're getting stronger where everyone else is really unstable and trying to find their way, and that's only going to pay off on the recruiting trail.
You mentioned the early signing period. Is that the reason for this huge coaching flurry right now?
Yeah, you're going to see a lot of that because remember, December the 20th is when a lot of these schools, a lot of these players, the early enrollees, or even the guys that want to show up in June, those are when those guys are going to make their decisions. And you got to start recruiting these guys. You need the in-home visits. You need the official visits. I mean, this is the first time right now. A pretty big day in recruiting just passed yesterday on the 26th, which was the opening of another contact period where coaches can get out on the road, they can get in home, and they can start really chasing the guys they're after, especially the guys that they're after for the 2018 class that will potentially sign on December the 20th. There's a lot of things to look for right there.
Jeff, take us through this.
So you got December the 17th. That's a quiet period. And you're going to look at quiet period and dead period kind of like you would at like traffic lights. Red light is definitely dead period. That means you cannot do anything except contact via social media and mail. Nobody does mail anymore, email. Quiet period involves no face-to-face contact. Dead period also involves no face-to-face contact. Quiet period is probably your yellow light. Dead period is your red light. And obviously a contact period is a green light where you can go meet them in school. You can go watch them perform in state championship games if these kids are still alive in the playoffs. This is a time when all these coaches and all these SEC staffs not only need to have their head coaches hired, Hannah, but they need to have their position coaches hired on a new staff. Like, one of the biggest questions is who's going to be Dan Mullen's offensive coordinator, his defensive coordinator, his offensive line coach. First things first, they're going to have to re-recruit a lot of those guys that were already committed to the program. And with Florida, they had the nation's number 13 class. So you've just got to find the right mix of personalities and bringing guys or keeping key guys on board to either, one, hit the reset button on the class and start over, or retain the key guys that the new staff wants. And with Florida, thing to think about there is a lot of guys that were maybe a fit for Jim McElwain's system are not going to be a fit for Dan Mullen's system.
Yeah, let's touch on a couple of these schools really quick. So what about Florida and Tennessee? We'll pick those, out of all of the other schools that are going through coaching changes. We know Cade Mays decommitted from Tennessee. That was, old news by now, the offensive guard, the OG that's from Knoxville, Tennessee. And is there anybody else that stands out to you besides Cade Mays from Tennessee, from Florida? I know we've mentioned so many names, but how about we pick those two schools and you let us know about some of the guys that could flip?
So Cade Mays is a guy to think about there, definitely. 5-star. I think he's a guard. He's rated as a tackle. You've got Alante Taylor, the 4-star athlete out of Coffee County in Tennessee. He was Tennessee's number 3 commitment, another really good commitment for Tennessee. He's a guy now that really is trending towards Georgia. You look at Florida. Florida didn't have a lot of head-to-head guys, but they had the potential to get in on a guy like Channing Tindall, perhaps. They had the chances, or where they were going to come after Jamari Sawyer, a Georgia target as well. Really key there is maybe Bo Davis staying on the staff there at Florida. You just got a lot of guys. I think the biggest takeaway for a lot of folks is there's lots of other players on the staff, like a Trey Dean at Tennessee. He might end up at South Carolina. Lots of other schools are going to take advantage of this sign of weakness from all the other schools, especially now that the season's over, and other schools are going to start recruiting these guys heavily. And the absence of a staff at Tennessee, and even a full staff at Florida, is going to be very telling.
And one more thing on the early signing period. So you're always in the know. Have you gotten any wind of anyone that's going to commit during the early signing period to Georgia?
I would say this. I would say Georgia currently has 18 public commitments. And I'm going to say, I've done my research a little bit on this. I would say you can look for about 11 or 12 of those public commitments to make their decision and go ahead and sign during the early signing period. Now, you've got a bunch of other key targets as well. And guys, I want you to get used to this. If you're going to you have to get used to this on this show. You might wake up on December the 23rd, and hopefully you got all your Amazon stuff ordered. But also, Georgia's class might be 20 out of 24. It might be 80% full by the time that rolls around, and there may only be like 4 names left to chase until National Signing Day.
Wow.
At least maybe you might have a few commitments that won't sign. I know Adam Anderson won't sign. He wants to just take some time and look around. But a lot of guys will sign during that early signing period. So you're going to have to look at a lot of things there, whereas the big signing days now are December 20, 21, and 22. And maybe the old school signing day, the late signing day, is only going to be a type of maybe a 5-star territory where somebody that really is good enough to wait will take all that time he needs to make his decision.
All right, we're getting a lot of questions in our comment sections about the injured UGA commit. So let's get right to it. That's Jeff Sintel. I'm Hannah Chalker. Thanks so much for joining us on Before the Hedges, presented by Kroger. So we all know what happened to Justin Fields, the QB. He broke his finger. Zamir White's injury. Before we get to anything else, we're getting a lot of questions on updates. Have we heard anything else? We got to do it. We got to go there.
We need to have it sponsored by some sort of urgent care facility or some sort of big hospital outside of Atlanta. This is the recruiting injury report. Zamir White is going to be seen by and attended to by the Georgia doctors. The surgery, if it's not scheduled, it will be scheduled for later on this week. A lot of his care will be done by the University of Georgia and that well-renowned training staff right there. Justin Fields, actually, he just got back from a vacation. I think him and his family went to, I think, the Bahamas over the Thanksgiving holiday. They went on a cruise, I think, something to that nature. They had a great time. But he's got a broken finger. He's going to try to come back for the Under Armour All-American game. That's the first week of January. Still not sure yet about whether he will sign early or not or enroll early. You got Zamir White with the ACL. He's no doubt Georgia all the way. He will sign early, and he will enroll at Georgia in January. Karis Jackson is an injury that's came up. He's not playing right now. What I've been told is it is an undisclosed injury, and his status for the playoffs is very much in doubt. That's 3 Bulldogs right there. Azeez Ojulari went down with what was appeared to be a serious knee injury against North Gwinnett on Friday. Of course, North Gwinnett beat Marietta as well and knocked Marietta out of the playoffs, but I would venture to say that Azeez would not have been able to play this week had Marietta advanced. And then from early in the year, you've got Owen Condon as well, the 6'7", big-time offensive tackle, 3-star out of Oklahoma City, also suffered a season-ending knee injury. And I tell you what, that's definitely a trend. There's 5 future Bulldogs there that will definitely be on the mend and will probably be in the trainer's room a lot more than they ever thought they would as freshmen at the University of Georgia.
And some of those we've talked about before are early enrollees, so it all just ties in together. Well, speaking of Zamir White, you took a visit to Scotland County High to get to know him off the field. What was that like?
Well, he's a good guy, man. First of all, he loves shoes. He loves Drake. He has an affinity for a certain type of animal. And he is just a laid-back, chill guy. If you notice it, he probably sleeps more than anyone might expect. Probably going to sleep just like a college student would, especially a football player. But we went one-on-one off the field like we like to do, kind of the UGA Q&A, where Zamir's a great dude. I had a chance to sit down with him and learn a little bit more off the field about Zamir, and I think you guys will enjoy it.
He also said if he could pick one date with the most beautiful girl in the world, that he would pick.
I know. And
let's find out.
Let's find out.
How about if you can go out with any woman in the world, who would it be?
Megan Good.
Why?
Man, she's just bad, man. She's a beautiful woman, smart. So, yeah.
So you had the chance to take her out. What are you taking her out? How are you dialing up a great date?
I mean, you know she kind of rich, so you got to take her out somewhere fancy, so anywhere nice.
You have a superstition? Anything like that?
Nah, I don't.
You afraid of anything? Afraid of the dark? Afraid of spiders? Afraid of heights?
Possums.
Afraid of possums, huh?
Yeah. Favorite movie? Seabiscuit.
Seabiscuit?
Yeah.
Why?
A racehorse movie, and I just love horses, so.
How much do you love horses?
A lot, man. A lot.
You usually, I remember writing about this, you usually go ride horses on the weekends or something like that?
Yeah,
like a stallion or something, or what do you ride?
All kinds.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Do you have a pet horse or one that you call your own?
I got one.
What's its name?
Zeus.
His name's Zeus, huh?
Yeah, one of them named Zeus.
One of his name's Zeus. Is he fast?
Oh, yeah, he's fast.
How many horses do you have?
Well, really, my grandpa got horses. So, me personally, I have 2.
2?
That's mine, but the rest is.
Is that the biggest thing you're going to miss from Laurinburg when you go to Athens?
Yeah, man, my horse, man.
If you could have any superpower in the world, what would it be and why?
I like to teleport.
Teleport, huh?
Yeah, you snout and I'm anywhere around the world. So that's just cool.
Yeah.
I'm very quiet, just chill, laid back type of guy. I'm not all a vocal guy really, so I just chill, man. I just do my part.
Let me say your football dreams come true.
Mm-hmm.
You get the first big check.
Mm-hmm.
What are you doing with that check?
First thing, I'm buying my mother a house. That's when me a house and just take care of my mother and my father and my sister. Yes, sir. I sleep a lot, like a lot. Yeah.
How many hours a day?
A lot. Like I come to school, go to practice, and come home around like 7 o'clock. Go straight to sleep till like 5 in the morning. Yeah.
Jeff, if you could have any superpower, what would it be?
Well, I used to say fly because that would have been pretty cool, but I like that teleport stuff right now. My expense report would be a lot trimmer and a lot slimmer if I could just sit there and go Laurinburg, Knoxville, South Beach, Bahamas, Hawaii. I just invented a recruit in Hawaii because I could teleport. Athens, Greece. You just be there, and all of a sudden they'd be like mileage rate. Would you get a teleport rate or something like that? Any accountants out there? Tell me what would happen there.
I would just do flying or teleport for avoid Atlanta traffic. I mean,
definitely.
Come on. Well, what else did you learn from Zamir White? You know, we could only put so much in a few minutes. What else did you learn?
Well, first of all, I was struck by his love for horses. I've never met a player that has 2 horses before, especially one that good. He also likes the color purple. That's his favorite color. And he is a shoe dude. Like, all you ladies out there that have a very robust shoe closet, you might want to talk to Zamir about that one day if you see him at a Georgia event, because the young man loves him some shoes. He really loves him some shoes. And now you know that he's afraid of possums. And he also really thought that if he could meet one athlete, he would love to meet Bo Jackson, because he wanted to know like how he maintained his speed and strength over the years.
I like that.
So Zamir is definitely a very interesting guy. You know about possums, you know about shoes, you know about horses. Maybe the most funny part about that is he has a horse named Zeus, and that's what people call him. They call him Zeus because he's so good. So there you go.
Strong as a horse.
He is a stallion out on the field, no doubt about that.
Well, tough news for Zamir. His high school career is over, but plenty of high school people are playing this week. It's a little thing called the semifinals, and it's big here in Georgia. And a ton of UGA recruits are continuing their high school careers. Who can we see on the field this Friday night?
You got some big action right here. If you guys want to make a trip, fill up the car with gas or something like that, the first place I would go would be to Rome, Georgia. Look down the name of the bottom of the list, Adam Anderson. Everybody calls him AA or the AA battery for Georgia's pass rush of the future. Number 1 Rome, the defending state champion, is taking on number 2 Buford. That is a slobber knocker, a gully washer of a game, is what my grandma used to say. You've also got Hapeville Charter, Chris Smith II, taking on Heard County. That's Ohio State commit Emory Jones. Half the world thinks Emory Jones is going to wind up at Alabama, not Ohio State. You've got Warren Erickson, a young man that you guys are going to get to learn a lot more about and read a lot more about in the coming days on DawgNation.com. Him and North Gwinnett's going to take on McEachern, and also the twin Bulldogs, the junior commitments, Rashad Cheney Jr. and Jaden Hazelwood. They won state last year. They're the number 1 team in the state this year, and look for Cedar Grove to repeat as well. Jaden Hazelwood is, I think, the missing piece to the one thing Georgia does not have in its talent roster right now, and that is a number 1 A.J. Green type receiver. Jaden Hazelwood is a 5-star. He is an extremely effective backdoor recruiter for the University of Georgia. Nation's number 1 receiver for 2019. Jaden Hazelwood is already, as folks like to say,
bless you.
They don't like to say sneeze or Gesundheit. They like to say a DGD. Jaden Hazelwood, Nation's number 1 receiver for 2019. Tremendous player.
Just been battling this cold for like 3 weeks now. Tough job.
Tough job. He said, if I would not go see recruits and be out in open airs on Fridays and Thursdays, and I would get better. I'm sure there's my mom in the back of my head saying, you need to stay inside, blah, 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 blah. Put something on your head. I digress. Got work to do. Got recruits to talk to.
Well, back to the high school playoffs for really quickly. I know a lot of our viewers probably followed that pretty well. Do you have any predictions, or who do you think are the front runners?
I think Rome will come out in an incredible game there at Rome High School. I look for Cedar Grove to race past Calhoun. Hapeville Charter, the Charter is definitely a tremendous program. I think they're going to win at least one more round. You got Marist versus St. Pius in a tremendous Catholic school battle there in Metro Atlanta. That North Gwinnett-McEachern game will be pretty good. And Blessed Trinity, you got to remember, Blessed Trinity and J.D. Bertrand, the linebacker, who knocked off Cartersville 2 weeks ago. Everybody thought they would be the eventual state champion. I do like J.D. Bertrand and Blessed Trinity to move on past Calhoun this week as well.
Well, besides him, we're getting a lot of comments in our Facebook Live section about different players and things that are going on. So let's go ahead and go there. Jeff Santel, I'm Hannah Chalker. This is the time in the show. Go ahead and send in your questions. I've tried to save a few off to the side, but they go so quick that I lose them. If you have a good question, go ahead and put it back at the top. But let's start with James Crump. He says, do we have a better chance of getting Alontae Taylor or Cade Mays?
Ooh.
It's a pretty good question.
50-50.
Okay.
I think it's pretty close. I think maybe slightly the chance might be a little bit better for Alontae Taylor.
Jake Perez, do they light up the bins in the fourth? We're going to get to that in just a minute, right?
That's going to happen. They're going to light it up. You mean the scoreboard, or do you mean the fourth quarter? That's a tremendous little layered question right there.
Gary Lewis, surprised we don't have more top wide receiver interest in 2018. What do you think?
Well, yeah, 2018 is a year where Georgia just went after their guys. Kearis Jackson, Elijah Moore, Marquez Ezard was in the mix there for a time, and so was Josh Vann. They just settled on Kearis. Kearis has been Georgia's main target at receiver for many a day, dating back to this time a year ago, maybe even longer than that. But they do have the nation's #1 and #2 recruits at receiver for 2019, and Jaden Hazelwood, the aforementioned Jaden Hazelwood, and also Dominic Blaylock as well. Georgia is going to get 2 receivers in a class in 2019 that you have to go back almost a decade to get talents like that.
I'm trying to get some comments here coming in. They're coming in a little delayed here. All right, people are asking for your score prediction on Saturday. We'll get to that in just a second. Let's see what else we got from fans here. All right, James Crump again. We have the 2 top wide receivers in the nation coming in 2019. What else do we need with like 4 question marks?
Wow. Well, you definitely need, for the rest of 2018, you need some interior offensive linemen. You need some more help at linebacker. I think Georgia needs to add at least one other defensive back. Likely, there's a lot of needs, but in 2019, you'll see Georgia stock up on defensive tackles again and inside linebackers again. You'll also see Georgia maybe pick up one other running back. They're going to have to do something with adding an additional quarterback in 2019 as well, but give them about one more year, and Georgia will be recruiting positions not out of need, but out of just simply depth and luxury items as well. They're going to have a stable full of players with about one more recruiting class after this one.
Rhett Dallas asks, if a player transfers, can UGA use that spot next year?
Yeah, definitely. The things to remember about are 25 and 85. That's kind of like some sort of math problem, but Georgia can never sign, any school in the SEC, that's a league rule, they can never sign more than 25 guys in a year. Now, Georgia blue-shirted at least one player this year, so I think their number there is 24 for 2018, and they didn't have any way to back count guys for 2017. The other number, they've kind of got to go in tandem, 25 and 85. You can also never sign more than 85 players on scholarship at one time. So you'll see Georgia with a lot of early enrollees and guys transferring out, program migration, program attrition, whatever you want to call it. They will eventually reach a spot where they have enough freed up scholarships where maybe they can watch guys transfer out, and then that scholarship can be used elsewhere. But you can never, ever have more than 85 guys on campus on scholarship at one time. And that's one thing you'll have to watch there, especially in the early period, about how many guys Georgia can take.
We'll take one more question. About 5 people just asked about the front 7, including Marcus Jackson. Thoughts on the front 7 and who we've got coming in for that?
Front 7, okay, so obviously Brenton Cox is a new variable there as well. You've got Jordan Davis, the big 4-star defensive tackle out of Mallard Creek. Devontae Wyatt will be there in January. He will be a mid-year enrollee. He was a 2017 non-qualifier. There's also Tramel Walthor out of Liberty County, same high school which produced Richard LeCount. There's also thoughts of Robert Cooper. I'm not going to say the Robert Cooper ship has sailed just yet, because Robert's going to take his decision very slow and down to the wire. So the front 7, those guys in the box. Georgia's also going to look to add linebackers like Channing Tindall, Otis Reese, KJ Henry, I think, is still in the mix, maybe not as prevalent on the board, as high on the board in terms of interest in Georgia, is maybe more the likelies for Georgia. Channing Tindall, Otis Reese, those guys are much more likely. And this new news from Brenton Cox is definitely something to consider as well.
Charles Kaiser is asking, Hannah, are you flipping to UGA? Charles, I've already flipped, so that's all I can say about that. Score prediction, SEC Championship. Fans, we want to know what your score prediction is too. What are you going to do?
My score prediction is 27-23. I'm going to have to wait until later in the week to figure out Kerryon Johnson and just who wins that football game. But I know this. for Georgia to have any chance at bringing home that huge SEC championship trophy, I think Mecole Hardman will have to have a tremendous game. He's been so close on a lot of plays, a lot of breakout plays in the return game. I think Georgia's going to have to get a score. He's going to have to house one in the bins for Georgia to have a real shot with Auburn. I think it'll be a much different game. The lines of scrimmage will be much more equal. And I think also Georgia will have to have a time in terms of managing those discipline penalties as well. I think the Benz Stadium crowd will also help out Georgia as well. I think it's going to be a great SEC championship game.
You gave your score, but you're going Georgia. You're picking Georgia.
I gave a score. I don't know who's going to win yet. You got to tell me I got to see where Kerryon Johnson is at right now. Okay. It is fool's gold for you to make a prediction when you don't know where maybe the SEC's first-team running back is going to be and what his availability will be like.
All right. Well, maybe on your Wednesday night show, you can give everybody your score prediction. Where can everybody watch that, and where can they find your information?
Okay. www.DawgNation.com/recruiting. The Centel's Intel blog goes up every morning, at Jeff Centel on Twitter. www.facebook.com/DawgNation. That's where you're at right now. Wednesday Night Live, 8:30. We give away $50 in groceries. We have a lot of fun. We play six-pack trivia. I answer every question I possibly can. My kids will try to stay away from the broadcast. And we'll get after it like we do every Wednesday night. I always appreciate everybody hanging out there.
All right, and we appreciate you here joining us on Before the Hedges every Monday at 6. Jeff Centel, I'm Hannah Chalker. Thanks so much for watching us. We'll catch you next time, guys. See you later.